The second plate. I keep the towel on the oven handle folded a certain way. Not neat, not sloppy, just enough of a hang that the bottom edge brushes the knob of the cupboard under the sink. It didn't begin as a ritual. It was the way my mother left towels when she cooked, and my hands grew into it without consulting me. If I come home and the towel is off, the rest of the night feels misaligned. I don't talk about this to anyone at the warehouse because the men there have their own arrangements with fate and I don't care to see mine compared. That evening, I came back by the usual streets, Plover, then Rye, then the little shoulder of Browner's Lane to cut the light at Halley. I could have walked. Greybank is that sort of town, low and soft and smelling like someone hosed the sidewalks recently. But the shift had been heavy, and my back had made itself known running pallets to the loading doors, and I wanted the refrigerator hum, and the sink water, and my chair by the window with its old cushion that holds the shape of me too faithfully. I turned the key, and the lock gave that forgiving turn it has when the landlord greases it as a favor to himself. The door swung in, and I met the smell before any light. Roasted chicken, not the stringy spin of rotisserie from the market. The thick savory of a bird done low in someone's oven, with cloves of garlic gone gold, and split to sweetness skin rendered to lacquer, and the herbs letting go all their last. Potatoes, too, the hard ones from the corner stall, cooked until the edges feather and the cores go to cream. Sometimes the neighborhood sends smells upstairs to let you know you share walls, but this was here. It had weight, the heat of it moving into me like a hand. I felt the air lift in that dumb way you feel when you think a person will be in the next room to laugh at your surprise, and then the small cold along the back of the neck when you remember you live alone. I stepped into the hall and put my hand on the wall, and my fingers found the small nick by the light switch that I made last August, moving the bookshelf. I said my name out loud once to make the apartment tell me if it agreed. Cal, I said. It agreed by being the same wall. The living room was dark. The lamp by the radio in the corner had done what lamps do when no one tells them to perform. It watched. Beyond, the dining room square where the window faces the back lot, the little brass lamp on the buffet had been turned on. It's not one I use often because the narrow shade makes the light a theatrical cylinder. But there it was, casting that slow yellow that makes a room look better than it deserves. On the table, plates, too. The placemats I keep stacked in the cupboard under the mugs. 2 drinking glasses with water in them, the cold up to the line where someone had filled and then accounted for gravity. Steam rising from a wide platter, a chicken cut cleanly. The way a knife with enough patience and a hand with old knowledge makes cuts breast section, thighs and legs, arranged in a politeness circle, potatoes tucked around like promises kept. A sprig of what might have been rosemary lay where a cook would lay it when they want to act as if green will fix things. For a dangerous second I thought, I have forgotten something, and someone has taken pity. That went away because no one has a key. The door was still clicking to itself from being opened. I turned and looked at the chain, still set, still drooping down the way it does when you unlatch it after coming in and don to swing it tidy. The window latches in the living room are finicky and show it. They rested at their foolish little angles that keep our building from being lost in all the city S buildings. There was a neatness to the table that didn't belong to me. I keep clean enough, but I don't set forks with the tines, pointed toward a very old notion of what constitutes grace. The knife at the right-hand place had been laid, so the blade faced inward toward an imaginary host. The napkins folded in that tri-point you learn from magazines that never lived with a person tired from a shift. I took a step, then another. Steam lifted from the platter like a ghost learning to take shape. The kitchen beyond was quiet. The stove turned off. My towel at the oven handle hung exactly right. There were no pans on the stove, no sheet in the sink, no little burnt specks to tell me someone had attended the chicken the way chickens need. The oven door glass was clean because I am the kind of person who wipes it on Sundays. The dish rack held the same 3 plates and 2 bowls it had held when I left that morning because I had no reason to eat breakfast. My mug sat upside down, an old arc of tea staining its lip from months ago when I made a promise to buy new mugs and didn't to keep it. I put my hands out over the platter of chicken. Heat rose into my palms. There is the heat of a thing just cooked, and there is the heat of a thing that has been kept warm by the usual tricks. This heat knew bones. It had that thickness that comes when fat has been patient. I said the dumbest thing I have said in years. "Who's this for?" I asked the air. There was a small sound behind me. Not a footstep. This is an old building. Footsteps in it are declarations, not a cough. Not the elevator's little beep from the hall, because my door was shut and the elevator's noises come through like moral propositions, not like this. A rustle. Perhaps the touch of cloth against a doorway. Perhaps the movement a person makes when they lift a hand and then put it back. It came from the dark of the living room. My spine did what spines do for a living. I turned. Nothing. The couch made its old dim rectangle against the far wall. The radio's dial glowed with its small dead fish shine, the pretense of life equipment makes. The print I hung above the radiator of the water's edge looked the same as always. The boats there never worse for weather. The light from the dining lamp did what light does. It ended in a line and didn't cross it unless you brought it a reason. I breathed. I listened for the building. The stairwell light buzzed on the landing because the fixture is old and opinionated. It sounds like someone building a model airplane in another room. The apartment upstairs did its plumbing. A cough through ancient pipes that never learned to keep secrets. Out on Rye Street, a siren chased itself the way sirens do, whether or not they find anyone guilty. My chair was there under the window with last night's newspaper folded in its seat. On the little table beside it, a receipt from the corner market for a bottle of seltzer and a bag of salt nuts. The receipt curved, thermal print on the edge already fading. The date was right. The time said 6:12 p.m., which is when I, D, stood under the market, S, soft hum, and tapped my foot and listened to the barcode beeps count the week for other people. The alarm clock on the sideboard over the radio blinked 7:38 in steady numbers. I lifted the receipt from the little table. 2 items. Total, tax, the careless sense of it. My pockets contained no other paper. Some limit I put on my apartment's willingness to be exceptional cut-in. I picked up a fork. I cut a section of breast, the skin splitting with that sound only a knife knows. I put it in my mouth. It was, of course, perfect. The salt in it fell forward like a person introducing a friend. The fat had broken down the way people talk about things breaking down when they want to be kind and scientific at once. The herb had given up all it had for the cause and died with dignity. I stood there with the fork in my hand and laughed once, the way a man laughs at a joke that used to make him laugh. That sent whatever was behind me away down the hall, like a polite person leaving a room when the person who belongs in it returns. I did not eat more. I set the fork down on the edge of the platter because I could not take the sound of the metal on ceramic. I poured myself a glass of water. It tasted like the hose my father used to fill a kiddie pool on a lawn 40 miles from here. That faint green that is only charming when you are a child. And there is an aunt to dry your hair with a towel that smells like a house lived in since a woman with good hands sorted it. I drank it anyway. I put the glass on the table at the empty place. The newspapers in this town will sell a person into trouble with 3 words and save them with a 4th. You learn which page to look at. The woodshop that used to be Morven's now holds a small gallery. The mill is a story now. The industrial park at the edge of Greybank rolls out the products people buy, and I stand on a line to move them when I'm paid to. The scanner beep on my palm pairing me with the cardboard, and the line on the screen one more stripe of my day. I can hold up at the end and say I did that. I walked through the rooms, bedroom neat enough. The bed as I'd left it. Blankets pulled up in the old fashion, because I grew in a house that taught that if you did not make your bed in the morning, you were telling the day you didn't respect it. The bathroom, tiles in a pattern that looks like someone trying to make things right with squares. The mirror above the sink caught me. I nodded to me like a co-worker who has been corrected and wants to keep his dignity and go on. The closet, coats, shoes in a pair of lines I have the humility to keep, soles forward. Back at the dining table, I moved one of the napkins a millimeter with the back of my hand and put it back. The two glasses clouded as they would when hot food enters a room that has been cool. The platter steamed into our apartment's future. I set a plate in the sink because I needed to perform an act that looked like authority. I told myself not to put the towel back over the oven handle with the little pull to the right. I did it anyway. Then I went to sleep. I have read that people in older buildings in smaller towns sleep well because noise is stored somewhere off-site and retrieved by men in the morning. I know that's not true, but you can see why it would want to be. The refrigerator hummed faithfully. I have never had cause to be ungrateful for an appliance, but gratitude is not a thing you carry with you until you need to. I woke at 2:18 to a small switch of air in the hall. A draft is a real thing. It negotiates with your skin. This air changed because something took up space for a second and then gave it back. It smelled like chicken not left long enough on a counter to recommend itself. The stairwell light buzzed, then stopped, then buzzed again, the ballast thinking about making a point. I lay with my face turned toward the bedroom door, not the ceiling, because the ceiling is an argument you never win. When the refrigerator clicked and began again, breath came back into my throat, and I didn't pretend otherwise. Morning came in the old way, light inserting itself through the slats of the blinds and laying small bars across the floor I couldn't convince myself were meant to be anything. I went to the kitchen and the platter was a platter. The chicken had cooled and skinned over in the way that is not disgusting if you grew up with women who knew that every part of food belongs to someone. The water in the glasses had condensed and left rings under them on the mats. The napkins had been moved a shade. The empty place had grown a small scatter of potato crumbs near where a left hand might have rested if the person had lifted it once to point at something and set it down again. At work that day, I carried the weight of not telling like an extra tote. I moved down the lines, the scanner chirking its little proof of life each time I pushed a code into the gun and met a box with its identity. A pallet fell 2 bays over when the forklift took the stutter strip too fast, and the ratchet strap sang when it failed, snapping its warning over our heads. I ate peanut butter from the break room on stale crackers in the way a man eats when he's saving hunger for something else. The men on the far bay made a joke in the old style that doesn't seem funny anymore. And I laughed because the old style is how we build bridges across afternoons you would otherwise drive into the dark. At lunch, I went to the market, and the scanner made its beep twice when the girl swung it over my fruit and bread. The second beep apologizing for the first. I put the receipt in my pocket because I am that man, and we know it, and we do not revise it. When I got home, there were 2 receipts on the little table by the chair. One was the one I had put in my pocket. The other was from the market too. I pressed the 2 together and compared them like newsprint. The second receipt had a timestamp for 12:17, which is when I stood outside the warehouse door and breathed the cold and decided I would walk to the end of the block and back because the day had grown too many corners. Its items, a whole chicken, a bunch of rosemary, 2 lemons, a sack of potatoes, a box of salt, a bag of flour, a bottle of dish soap, a packet of napkins that matched mine too well. I took out my wallet. The last charge on my card was the bread and fruit and a bar of soap shaped like an orange because the clerk likes to put them at the front with a handwritten sign. There was no chicken charge at noon. That doesn't mean anything. People play at cleverness, cash, gift, someone else's card. but the receipt had my name on it at the top because I signed up for the little program that lets you declare you are loyal in exchange for money that feels imaginary at the time and real when it leaves. I called the market on the landline because the cell's reception is poor in the kitchen. "Hey," I said to the man who picked up, "this is Cal, up on Rye. Did someone else charge a purchase to my rewards?" He made the sound clerks make when their day has already asked too much and decides to be polite anyway. "You were in," he said. "Yesterday," he said, then earned his pay by not telling me what day it was. And at lunch, today, for bread and the orange soap bar. But yeah, the chicken and the stuff, cash," he said, delay rising at the end, as if to ask me if he was permitted to remember. "Cash and the card for the number." "All right," I said. It is a relief to remember that the truth does not need you to feel comfortable. "Thanks." "No problem," he said, freeing us both. The second dinner was fish. The lemon, the butter, the herb, the heat. 2 places, the napkins folded the other way. The glasses with water again filled to the same line. The pan in the sink this time, so it wasn't entirely a performance meant to make me feel gaslit into being favored. The pan cold, though. The metal dull under the sponge when I lifted it. The towel, my towel. The towel folded the way my mother folded towels when she wanted the room to believe it had obeyed her. I didn't like the meal this time, which made the fish better. I ate a forkful. 2. I was going to be the sort of person who did not accept a gift without at least holding it with 2 hands. I slept in the chair by the window because the bed felt like a lie. The light outside the window lifted and fell in its old way. The traffic light at Hallier's corner starred the blinds green, then red, then nothing, because some nights nothing is as useful as a law. The refrigerator clicked and hummed and clicked again. I woke with my cheek against the arm of the chair and the newspaper folded into my sternum and a blanket over my knees I had not placed there. By the 3rd evening, I understood that the empty place at the table was mine only if I insisted. It was a space the house held. The napkins would be folded for it. The knife would point toward it. The glass would be filled to the same line in honor of it. I stood at the head of the table and turned my head each way and considered changing the places, swapping what was empty for what had been set with meat. But the thought of the fine realignment of the apartment's breath that would cause stopped me. I have done many foolish things. I did not do that one. I read the news where it touched me. Greybank's water advisory: boil before drinking for an abundance of caution. The map showed our block in the pale yellow, which means for us that some person has put a hand in what doesn't belong to them and now wants our cooperation to pretend the hand was never there. The building manager put a photocopy of the notice on the front door with the tape he buys by the case, and we all have to fight when we remove it. Outage possible from 6:09 p.m. while crews assess. Crew. It is a word that makes you remember people are real. In the stairwell, the light buzzed in the usual rhythm until it didn't. A neighbor passed me with a bag of carrots, the tops green and not yet sad, and nodded without looking because his day had told him not to greet. The elevator beeped, then refused to answer. Its orange too flashed as if to tell us a moral lesson about being in a hurry. Someone on the 3rd floor had propped the laundry door open with a bottle of detergent, and the smell of it held in the hall like a well-meaning Aunt S perfume. I didn't go to the woods. I'd been in Wakeshire the Sunday before last, but I didn't think the woods belonged to this. I walked instead the length of Plover and turned up by the old school where the fence is low and the paint flakes in the particular way that makes a man think he could fix anything if the day allowed. I stood on the footbridge over the creek and counted the circles made by raindrops while the water was deciding whether to be rain or not. When I got back, the building had held my place. The 3rd dinner was not meat. It was a bowl of pasta, the way my mother used to cook pasta when money and pride got into a quarrel, salted and serious, the sauce clingy, the cheese plain and firm. It had her pepper in it. Pepper is not the place to grieve, but there it is. The empty place had been set with the smaller fork, the larger lay at the other place, the napkins again in the tri-point. The glasses first clouding, then clearing, then clouding again, as if someone had decided when they would take sips, and then changed that schedule to a newer one that believed in discipline, and then abandoned that plan too. I put my hand out and held it above the smaller fork, like a priest learning a new addition to the old rites, and that was when the rustle came again behind me and I did not turn. You can cut your own throat with turning. "Sit," I said. I didn't mean to, but the word decided to be more useful than the parts of me that prefer to let things carry on. The chair across from mine gave that small undoing cushions make under the patience of weight. The empty plate remained empty. If the napkin moved, it did so in the time it takes a man to tell the difference between a mercy and a forgiveness. The glass nearest that place did not fog, but a drop ran down the side and left a line like someone learning to see. "Okay," I said. The refrigerator clicked and began, and did not stop. I pulled out the chair at my place and sat and took up my fork and ate what had been given to me. It had my mother's texture wrong, which was right, because my mother is the one who has not been in this apartment since a winter when they asked the river to give her back a little more time, and the river did not. My mother did not set empty places. She set necessary places and then watched to see if someone would stand and take another. I didn't talk to the house about the second place again. It was now someone else's dignity to discuss, and asking would be unkind. I took to washing the forks and knives after I ate and setting them on the towel to dry, and then I folded the towel back to the oven handle with my two-fingered correction, the way my hands are built to do. When I slept, I did it fully dressed and on the bedspread, because some deals you make with your own breath require you to finish the formality of a day before you shut your eyes. At the warehouse, the compressor that keeps the cool dock from becoming a run of failure began to click a half-beat out of its old rhythm. I stood by the door, pretending to check a pallet manifest and listened to the click-click buzz. When we got the call about the 12 pallets bound for the medical building that had to go first, we took care of it. When Jerry at Bay 6 failed twice to get the fork under one crate, and then did it and looked over to see if anyone had noticed, I noticed and gave him a look that said I would allow him to keep that wound to himself. The men drank their coffee black and talked about the ferry schedule cutting the evening run in half. Because fog had moved in, and because men who run ferries like to invent caution as a religion when the wind plays with their hats. I signed down for Sunday because the week felt like it would be better if I presented my body to something predictable. The barcode guns sang for me all afternoon, a crisp tone for each box that accepted my love. At lunch, I did not go to the market. Back home, there were 2 receipts again on the table. The second was from the market in the morning, for flour and salt and a chicken and rosemary my apartment had already put to its own uses. On the 5th day, the building manager taped the notice in the lobby about gas line inspections. Entry between 9 A and 12 P, please secure pets. And I stood next to Mrs. Cone from 3B while she read it with her mouth moving, and then she noticed my presence and folded her lips into that careful old smile that knitted us together before we could decide to remain separate. The stairwell light buzzed while we read, and the lamp someone had draped in a scarf on the landing gave us a damp, romantic yellow. Her apartment smells like cigarette smoke, even though she does not smoke. I suspect the previous occupant left a map under the paint. There were postings at the edge of the neighborhood about the closures near the river because someone at the industrial park had let something into the air, and the advisory said if you were elderly or compromised, you should consider an indoor day if possible. The buses ran on the hour, and then did not, and then did, because a driver I know by sight kept his word to a route that did not deserve him. The ferry was out of service for 2 hours. The traffic light at Halley went into the blink of all red, for the period it calculates in its secret head to be necessary when rain turns to the sort of rain that makes a desire to return, something feel foolish. If you ever wanted a town to teach you how to love a room, Greybank does. It will make you feel that standing in a hall in a building you pay for means you have done enough. It will make you feel that rearranging a towel is a way to end a war. On the sixth evening, the dinner was simple. A pot of soup, carrots, onions, noodles like a child's favorite, the chicken again in respectful shreds, the pepper clean, 2 bowls, 2 spoons. The empty place sat with its spoon S-handle pointed just left of center, the way I make a spoon rest when I have not decided where to settle. The chair opposite me had a small depression within the cushion, the size of a person who never learned to sit his whole weight down. At once a careful person with a class of discomfort, polite people will pretend not to notice. We ate in silence. I filled the empty bowl again and then again, because this was how my mother taught us love worked. You did not ask, you repeated. The water in the glass at that place fell down to a line 1 glass below the other. S. The napkin at the end had a faint smear of pepper on a corner where a mouth might have been attended to if the person attending to it had learned to wipe after the fact from television and not a hand. I folded my napkin up with the sort of care these things demand when you cannot add speech to a table, and I left the other where it lay because I did not have the right to tell it that it was wrong. After, I cleaned. No pans, again. The soup pot was in the cupboard, on the highest shelf, and a chair had been dragged to stand on, the marks under the chair legs, fresh enough to make me a man to whom a long list could be read, and he would not answer a single question. The towel was folded wrong, and I folded it right and then wrong on purpose. At midnight, the building lost power. The refrigerator hushed. The click did not come. The room went to a soft dark, the kind that owes you. Outside, the streetlight across the way insisted on performing because it belongs to a grid that pretends it can make individual decisions. Somewhere far away, a relay hit, the little sharp clap of a switch. The stairwell light was no longer an available presence. A neighbor on the landing cussed softly and then said sorry to the quiet as if someone she loved had just looked at her funny. I put my ear to the refrigerator and listened to it remember itself. It found itself in a minute. I breathed out like the person whose job it is to make a sound when a room finishes a story. The 7th day was my breaking point, but that sounds like a thing a tire advertises, the depth of its grooves. It was simply the quiet accumulation of acts until they were no longer something I could talk around. The county had lifted the boil, then put it back on for my block because of a line break under the street where the old pipes go, where the town hides its truest gossip. The elevator had been locked for repairs, and a printed sign on a clipboard at the lobby said to take the stairs, out of an abundance of caution. The ferry had reduced to an every other shape of itself, and the bus did what it could under the early dark. The corner market scanner beeped on beeps. The girl at the counter had to wave the bottle of dish soap over the light 3 times, and we smiled at one another's time. I came home at 5, and the towel was wrong. That was the plainest part. It hung too high. A person who does not cook leaves towels like that, scared of their own stove. I stood and looked at the towel, and then the table and the table, and then the towel, and then I folded the towel down, and it fell into the line of the oven handle like a thing gratefully returning to its main business. The dinner was a polite little roast of pork, apples, the onions honest. I sat. Before I could touch my fork, the chair opposite me made a small noise like someone falling into it with a secret after not wanting to be the first to sit. The glass at that place fogged, very lightly. A small breath from across the table lifted my napkin and let it fall again in a way I would like to think was an apology. "Stay," I said. It came out like a person telling a dog to remain. I did not mean it that way. The heat from the food climbed. The refrigerator hummed at the tone I now think of as the true one. From the hall, a sound. "No," I said to the hall without turning my head, because if you dare to give a hallway the dignity of your eyes, it will show you something you can live with. I looked into the heart of the roast, and the roast accepted my attention as if I were a person who had earned any attention. The chair across from me shifted once, a little. I reached across and put 2 slices of apple on the empty plate, and then removed my hand to my side of the table, as if the air had a line in it like countries. It is a small thing to say this. I let whatever had been playing in my apartment set the table this way, finish setting it. We finished that evening together. I washed the plates and left them in the rack, and the towel remained for once exactly where I placed it. After, the building exhaled through all of us as the hot water made its last good noises. Upstairs, someone dropped an object, and the sound traveled through stud and joist and flesh into me, and I felt I had been given a gift. The proof of company. The cat in 2B knocked something off a table, and the woman there made the small noise women make when they own graceful accidents and do not want them to belong to anyone else. I slept on top of my blankets. I dreamed there was a tide schedule posted in the lobby instead of our mailboxes, and I knew exactly when it would be right to step into the hall and when to remain. When I woke, the schedule was gone, and the mailboxes were their hard boxes again, each with their flaking labels, and the landlord's handwritten reminder under them telling us not to let flyers cover the number plates. On the 8th day, I did something I had not. I set 2 plates myself. I did it in the late afternoon, before whatever lived on the other edge of the apartment thought it was time. I boiled the water the county wanted me to in a clean pot and made tea. I took 2 cups from the cabinet and poured equally, and put lemon in one and not the other because I hate the taste of lemon in tea and I wanted to be generous. I set the cups on the table opposite one another. I sat, a while more. The air path behind me, the one that had done its little unspooling before, moved half a degree. The chair opposite did not sound itself. I kept sitting. The tea cooled. The thought announced itself that I am a fool, and I welcomed that thought as an old friend. Then something small fell upon the table near the second cup. A tiny sound of weight, faint enough to make it unkind to mention. The tea there remained untasted. I put my hand out, palm up. It is a terrible thing a hand offers so much when you are not the person who ought to be asked for so much. Something like air pressed into my palm, not a person's hand, not an animal. The touch had a shape and then did not. Warmth assembled into me along the line of my outstretched fingers and then receded, like waves in a photograph. If you had asked me then, I would have said that what touched me was glad I had put my hand where I had, and that is the sort of talk that should put you out of a decent room. I let it be. It withdrew. The tea cooled and became something else. I stood and did the plates and left the towels and wiped the counter and listened to the refrigerator only. I did not unset the table. The second week was composed of days like those and new ornaments. A notice on the door informed us there would be fire alarm maintenance Friday. The public service advisory about wildlife circulating in proximity to residential waste, which meant raccoons. The mail not being delivered because a flood had taken out the short bridge up on Harrow. The market running out of rosemary because the person who orders it wrote the number down wrong and did not feel like calling the supplier selfless names over the phone about it. The night the traffic light at Halley's Corner went to all red blink blink, and then stayed there long enough that men in trucks decided the town did not love them enough. We all built beliefs around these and set them aside for later. I ate. The food came whether or not I announced my willingness to be fed. Some nights there were leftovers, and on other nights there were none. On those, I found crumbs on the empty napkin as if a careful person had eaten quietly. Twice a week, the market receipts showed themselves, curling at the edges under the lighthouse magnet I keep on the fridge door, each with larger orders than I am used to treating myself to. Once I found a receipt from a different market halfway across town, one I haven't gone into since I came here. The receipt folded into the crease of a book on my chair. I have the book from my mother, and the receipt will remain there as if it were important and not terrible. My sleep buckled, then held. I developed a habit of standing in the hallway just after 1, in the narrow part where the runners dip, and letting the air move into me and past me. It makes a foolish person to believe standing in a particular place at a particular time is a way to earn the right to be standing there next time. I was a foolish person. I touched the wall with my knuckles sometimes. The wall kept being a wall. I think that is what made this all possible. At the edges of things, small changes took up residence. The refrigerator hummed one step lower than before. I could tell when the compressor's click would come, and was, more often than not, right. The stairwell light's buzz found a beat I thought I could count with my pulse. The neighbor's cat scratched at her door twice, and then not at all, and then delicately, as if now he believed in the terms we were all living on. The barcode scanner at the market, the chirp I knew from the warehouse, went into a double chirp rhythm for a day, and then a triple chirp, and then nothing but a hard, long beep whenever it read anything, as if all codes had been rolled into one. I told no one in real life about the dinners. I wrote a message to my sister with the first sentence and then deleted it. I composed an email to the building manager and his assistant saying I believed someone had a key, but I did not send it, because saying so would mean a person would come to my house with the good wrench and the scolding voice and fit me for a theory that would never let my rooms be mine again. At the warehouse, I told no one. If a thing is to matter, sometimes you hold it against your chest with both hands like a child and do not let the men see. On a Wednesday, the county issued a social post about community murders, then deleted it and reposted with murals. The screenshot circulated anyway. We don't have murders here, or we do, and we do not admit it in time to make the screenshot interesting enough to share. We have murals. The one under the bridge is of fish that no one living has ever pulled up from the water. It is beautiful, not because it is true, but because someone painted it in the winter. The breaking point came quiet. I had expected drama because I am not immune to stories. But the point was simply this: a spoon moved a centimeter near my hand toward the edge of the plate. And then, exactly at the line where a spoon hangs and does not, it stopped. Not something out of the corner of the eye. More exact, I had placed the spoon with its handle pointing to one side, the way I like, because the elbow can then pass. The handle turned on the mat in that small, slow way objects move, if a person is patient enough to imagine them moving, and then the spoon lay with its handle toward me. I picked the spoon up. The weight sat properly in me. I set it back down with the handle pointing toward my hand again. It didn't move. I saw, in the water that had condensed on the glass at the empty place, a line drawn by a drop that had not been there the minute before. I'd been keeping my poor mouth shut for a week, so I said, "All right." Then, "All right." The chair across from me made that small give of cushion. I put my hand out, palm up. The press of air into my palm came slower this time. It was not colder than the room. It had nothing you could put in a report. It sat, a weight without the courtesy of weight, in my palm for long enough that my hand remembered the shape afterward, and then it was gone. I slept with the pantry door open. This is irrelevant, except that I have not done that since I was a child in a kitchen where the door to the pantry was a mouth of fear, and I no longer let my sleeping self test me like that. I woke to the sound of distant sirens, not asking any of us to get out of the way, and the refrigerator, thank you, clicked and resumed its life. By the third week, people in town had phrases for the notices. Caution out of courtesy, some said. abundance of caution for everything else. The ferry schedule put weather dependent in italics. The building manager laid a note under our doors asking us not to place boxes in the hall, his flawed handwriting turning our apartment numbers into letters. The market switched from rosemary to time because something had to change. The barcode beeps at work altered the small song of the line for a day, and Marshall in receiving made a show of dancing to it, and I pretended I didn't appreciate him in order to keep my place among men. One evening near 4, I heard the rustle in the hall earlier than usual. The lights in the building flickered and then held. The towel I had left folded loose went tighter all by itself. I stood by the doorway between the rooms, and I did nothing. "Stay," I said at last, because I felt the lattice in the apartment learning how to shake. Then I said, "You're here," because sometimes naming is the only favor we can afford. I sat. The chair across from me had the decency to make no sound. There are many ways to ruin a story like this. I could say that I saw something. I could give it shape. I could tell you a face. That would be a lie. And worse, it would be unkind. I saw steam lift from the bowl at the other place and then decline. I saw a breadcrumb on the table, a very small point of it, move toward the rim of the plate by the length of a fingernail and stop as if told it had done enough. In the mirror of the window, in the dark glass that shows the neighbor's yellow stairwell through my own reflection, for a second I saw the wrong number of chairs. Then the lights from Halley S traffic signal cut that glass and gave me back a man with one face inclined toward the table. And that man was not handsome and very tired. And I liked him. I have not always. I thought about cooking my own dinner. It seemed the sort of choice a person makes when they want to take something from a being they do not understand. Then the market receipt startled my palm. It had been placed under the lighthouse magnet. It was for a bag of onions, a canister of salt, a stick of butter, a sack of flour, and then, in a neat melodic hand, the produce boy's writing, I believe, because his sixes have the same little hat on them when he labels fruit, for later. Who keeps receipts? I do. I lined them up in a stack on the counter under the magnet, and I folded the towel, and I sat and I ate because it would have been rude to treat the food otherwise. On the 4th week, the county lifted the closures. Then it put them back for a day because the hazard assessment needed additional readings. If you work with machines, you know what it is to need additional readings. The building manager wrote "all set" on a note and slid it under our doors as if to be the cardinal of our small valley. The laundry room reopened for limited cycles. The elevator beeped and came when it was called. The stairwell light glowed steady for 24 hours, and I could have kissed it. The traffic light at Halley did its correct pattern and only lingered once on yellow, and I nodded, because this town has its own loyalties, and we need to let it keep them. Dinner kept coming, not every night, never at exactly the same time. I began to understand I was a witness as much as I was a participant, and I learned how to sit correctly at a table in a room that wanted me there. The empty place was no longer a threat. It was a duty. There were nights with no food. There was steam once and then nothing, the platter empty because someone like me had no heat to give. There were nights when I would come home late and the apartment would smell like a pot of soup had been prepared and then reconsidered, and I let it be and went to sleep without making myself into a person for anyone else. Sometimes I heard a stirring behind me in the hall, and I didn't turn. Sometimes the refrigerator waited. Sometimes the towel went wrong, and sometimes it was correct. I have said nothing about a woman or a child because I did the math on memory and decided they do not belong here except as proofs that everything we do is given to us, and everything we fail to do is ours to collect. I have said nothing about science except when it was used to make the town gentle. I have said nothing about religion because I live in an apartment on Rye with a towel on the oven handle and a refrigerator that has kept me alive and that will have to serve. I know this. If I do not sit at the table at least 3 nights in a row and put my hands out over the plates and lean and breathe, something in the apartment shifts. The stairwell light will buzz too much or not at all. The traffic light at Halley wears yellow, like a shirt it forgot it put on. The barcode scanner at the market will fail, and the clerk will laugh out of the other corner of her mouth, the one that says she's used to failure. The refrigerator will click too late. The towel will hang as if someone who disliked me had been here. These are slight things. They are the kind of things you would mock a man for believing in. On the last evening I will talk about, there was a storm that never found its voice. The town offered up its low noises and its higher ones, and then kept them. The stairwell's temporary lamp clicked when I passed, as if someone had turned it off and then remembered me walking and turned it back on again. At the market, the scanner's beep had returned to its original tone, and when I said thanks, the boy with the produce handwriting said no problem, without meaning either half of it. The county posted that the caution was no longer in an abundance, but an ordinary allotment, which is as close to love as the county can bring itself to say. In my apartment, the table was set. 2 plates, 2 glasses, forks and knives correct. It was not chicken or pork or fish, not soup or stew. It was the one meal I would have asked for if anyone had asked. Bread, eggs, the butter with the salt in it already, a salad like a garden in a dish and not like work. The napkins folded in the poorest imitation of a pretty shape. The towel hung wrong but proudly, the glass fogged on both sides like a pair of eyes. I sat. The chair across from me said yes. I put the bread on the other plate, then mine, and got it wrong and corrected myself because hospitality is a craft you learn even if you are learning it alone. After we had taken bites in our own fashion, I put my hand out over the center of the table, palm down this time. A pause. Wind in the hall in the summer. A press upward into my palm, as if a person were standing beneath it, asking not for forgiveness, but the ordinary right to be called here. I said one thing then. All right. The same word I said in the beginning, but now with a grain of salt in it. Afterward, I washed plates and put them in the rack. I dried the glasses because if you leave water on them, they spot, and I done like to drink from a thing that shows me the tally of my laziness. I folded the towel, wrong first and then right. I put the receipts in the tray. I stood in the narrow part of the hall and let the air cool the small space behind my knees, and I thought about my mother, Pepper, and my father as hose water, and the way the barcode guns at the warehouse make me feel like I'm adding to a catalogue of measurable goods. Then I went to bed and slept. Sometimes the system of a life will allow you to inventory it. Sometimes it requires only that you be present while someone else tries. I suspect this second requires less boasting and more hands. I wake in the nights that are meant for waking. I hear the refrigerators click and I go back to sleep. Sometimes the click doesn't come, and I walk to the doorway of the kitchen and stand that brief cool of the hall, moving into my lower back a blessing, and the click comes because the world loves us just enough to prove us wrong. The table is set for 2 now on most nights, but not every night, in a rhythm I cannot own. The napkins fold themselves into shapes I praise and scold. The towel learns my mood and misbehaves and behaves in a pattern I cannot map. The market receipts curl, and making a stack out of them with my hand is a way to count days that feels honest. The traffic light at Halley listens when I walk by. The stairwell light tries, sometimes it learns. The barcode guns sing at the warehouse, and I do not count the beeps anymore except when I must. The city sends me notices, and sometimes I obey them, and sometimes I don't. The ferry's horn explains itself to the fog, and sometimes the fog accepts the apology. If you come to my apartment, and you won't, but if you do, you will find a table set correctly for a person and a presence. You may not see it because seeing is a skill with a curve, and ours is poor. You will hear a refrigerator that has not abandoned me. You will see the towel hung in a way that will earn your argument, and I will let you win. You will see the receipts under the lighthouse magnet, and the way the paper's back is gently imprinted with grids from the printing, and you will see where I touched one with a pencil once, and where I stopped mid-shade out of respect. You will see the shallow depressions my feet have made in the runner at the narrow part of the hall, and you will not make the mistake of calling them where. If you look at the chairs and their shadows, you will count wrong and wrong again, and then you will stop counting. You will try to understand why the napkin at the place across from mine bears a small, neat stain of pepper every third night. You will hear a rustle behind you, and, if you knew me, you will do what I have learned. You will not turn. You will sit. You will put out your hand, and you will feel a shift in the air into the shape of your palm. And when you leave, you will notice that the towel has made up its mind, and the refrigerator hums a little lower, and you will walk down the stairwell with the light buzzing in the old way, and the traffic light at Halley's slipping into yellow and holding there for a delicate, unbecomingly long time, as if awaiting a guest who has been invited, a guest who has not yet arrived, a guest who might be you, and who, if you stand and breathe, is already here. If this story lands with you, please like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who enjoys quiet, literary horror. Comments are open. Tell me your favorite image or line.